The city lights blurred through the rain-speckled taxi window, each drop catching the amber glow of traffic signals and storefronts. I leaned my head against the cool glass, the gentle rhythm of the road almost lulling me to sleep after a grueling 3-day conference in Chicago. The meeting had gone late. The flight had been delayed. I hadn't slept properly in 2 nights. But none of that mattered now. I was almost home. I wasn't expecting fireworks or even a warm welcome. It wasn't that kind of marriage anymore. But I was looking forward to the comfort of familiarity. A kiss on the cheek, maybe. A warm bed. Her scent in the sheets. The taxi rolled to a stop at a red light on Maple and 6th, just a few blocks from our townhouse. I exhaled and looked out the window absently. And that's when I saw her. Amy, my wife, on the sidewalk, laughing, with someone else. Not a friend, not a coworker, not a relative. A man, tall, younger, stylish in that way that screamed effort. And she was dressed like she hadn't just stepped out of work, but stepped into something more intentional. Her hair was down, curled. Her coat was open despite the drizzle. Her blouse cut just low enough. Subtle, but I knew her. This wasn't casual. This was curated. They weren't just chatting. They were leaning in close, almost conspiratorial. Her hand touched his chest lightly. His fingers grazed her hip. And then, a kiss. Long. Practiced. Familiar. My stomach twisted as if I had just been gut-punched from the inside. I blinked once, then again, convinced I must be seeing it wrong. But the kiss went on, and when they finally broke apart, she looked up at him with the same smile I hadn't seen directed at me in years. The light turned green. The taxi pulled forward. I didn't turn back to look again. I didn't need to. That image was already seared into my brain, pixel for pixel. Amy, my wife, kissing another man. I didn't say a word to the driver. Just gave him a new address, my old college roommate's place across town. He muttered something about the change, then kept driving. The city passed by in flashes. Restaurants with happy couples. Neon signs glowing through the drizzle. A woman walking her dog under an umbrella. Everything looked normal. Everything except the way I felt. My phone buzzed. A text from Amy. Hey, did you land okay? I stared at it for a long time before replying. Yes. I'm staying at a friend's for a bit. I didn't give her a name. I didn't ask her anything. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg. Her reply came 5 minutes later. Okay, I'll see you later. That reply, so nonchalant, so casual, hit me harder than the kiss had. No confusion, no panic, no why, just okay. Like she'd been waiting for me to disappear. I didn't cry. Not yet. Not then. At my friend Will's house, no one was home. He was stuck at work. But he'd given me a key years ago, and the door still opened with the same gentle creak. The house was dark and quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I dropped my bag in the hallway and just stood there, numb. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw something, to call her and demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I walked into the guest bathroom, looked into the mirror, and stared at the man standing there. Me, tired, 37, wrinkled button down, eyes red not from tears but exhaustion, or something adjacent to grief. I'd been with Amy for 13 years. Married for 10. She was the only woman I had ever loved fully, honestly, stupidly. We had routines, traditions, a shared Spotify account, a dog named Baxter who preferred her side of the bed. I'd never even considered the possibility of her being with someone else. But now that I'd seen it, it made too much sense. I left her a note on the kitchen counter when I stopped at the house early the next morning to grab some clothes. It was short, not angry, just this. I need time. I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to plead. I wanted space. Maybe to breathe. Maybe to fall apart. Back at Will's, I dropped my duffel in the spare room. It smelled like cedar and fabric softener. There was a bookshelf filled with old sci-fi novels and a bed I hadn't slept in since my early 20s. I sat on the edge, stared at the wall, and finally let myself ask the one question I had been avoiding since the moment the cab rolled forward. How long had this been going on? The worst part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's the realization that it rewrites the past. The vacations, the lazy Sundays, the dinners she insisted on having without phones. Were those moments real? Or just well-rehearsed lies? Had she already been seeing him when she called me babe that morning? When she told me to stay safe at the airport? I played the memory of the kiss on repeat in my head. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't help it. Her hand on his chest, his fingers on her waist. The way she looked at him, smiling like she hadn't smiled at me in years. And still, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just hollow. Like a part of me had slipped out the window of that taxi and never returned. Will's mom, Linda, opened the door an hour later. She wasn't expecting me. Her face flashed with surprise, then concern, then something gentler. Something like understanding. "You don't need to be alone tonight," she said. And just like that, she stepped aside and let me in fully. Not just into the house, but into a space where I didn't have to pretend I was okay. Her voice cracked something open in me. A space I didn't know I had sealed shut. When Linda opened the door, I expected awkwardness. Maybe questions. Maybe pity. I got none of that. She just studied my face for a quiet second, the way you look at someone who's been hit without a bruise showing yet. Then she stepped back and said, calmly, "Come in. You don't need to be alone tonight." No judgment. No drama. Just presence. And it disarmed me more than any interrogation could have. The hallway smelled like lemon oil and something faintly floral. Her house had that lived-in warmth mine had lost years ago. Shoes by the door. A jacket draped over the banister. The faint sound of a TV upstairs, muffled. "Will's still at work?" she said. "He got caught on a late shift. He told me you might stop by." I nodded, unable to form a proper sentence. I stood there with my overnight bag hanging from my hand like a useless limb. Linda wasn't glamorous, not in the way magazine covers imagine women. But she had that quiet strength some people carry without flaunting. A softness around the eyes. Lines earned honestly. A steadiness I hadn't felt in my own home for a long time. "Leave the bag," she said. "I'll show you the basement later. First, you need tea. Or whiskey. I have both." Her voice had this warmth under it. Not flirtation, not yet anything like that. Just care. A simple offer of comfort from someone who knew when a man was breaking and didn't ask him to explain. The kitchen was dim except for a small lamp under the cabinets. She flicked the kettle on and leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely, letting the silence stretch until my pulse stopped trying to outrun itself. I didn't tell her about the kiss. Not then. I only managed. I had a bad day. She nodded once. She didn't pry, didn't fill the space with advice or stories. Just waited. It was unbearable, that kind of kindness. When she handed me a mug, our fingers brushed. Barely anything. A spark, or maybe just nerves firing where they hadn't fired in months. I looked down before she could read anything in my face. "You can stay as long as you need," she said. No explanations. No pressure. I wanted to say thank you. I didn't. The word felt too small. Instead I asked, "Where should I sleep?" She smiled. That slow, knowing smile older women sometimes have, empathy with edges. "I'll show you." She led me down a narrow staircase to a door at the bottom. The basement apartment. Private entrance. Small kitchen. Comfortable couch. A bed tucked behind a partition. Everything tidy but not staged. A place someone real lived in. "It's quiet down here. You won't be disturbed," she said. She hesitated at the doorway. The light above us cast a soft halo around her hair. She wasn't wearing makeup, or if she was, it was subtle enough to look like honesty. "If you want company later," she added, "I'll be upstairs. Don't try to be brave. Brave is overrated." Then she left me there. Alone. I sat on the couch and stared at the ceiling. I could still see Amy with that man. Her hand in his. The practiced kiss. The effortless confidence. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A text from her. "Let me know when you're coming home. We need milk." Milk. Not, "Where are you?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just domestic logistics. As if I hadn't washed her mouth on someone else's. I put the phone face down. Hours passed in silence. I heard the faint creaks of floorboards above. Footsteps. The refrigerator door. A cupboard. Life. The small, normal sounds of someone existing. It soothed me, absurdly. Like I had been living in a storm for so long that even the whisper of an ordinary evening felt like shelter. Around 1:40 a.m., a soft knock came at the door. I opened it. Linda stood there in a loose sweater, holding a teapot and 2 cups on a tray. "I made tea," she whispered. "If you're awake, come up." I followed her up to the kitchen. We sat across from each other. The steam curled between us like something alive. She didn't ask for explanations. I didn't offer any. We just sat. The silence was comfortable, not heavy. At some point, my fingers were shaking around the cup. I didn't know when it started. She reached over and placed her hand on mine. Warm, steady, human. My throat tightened. I looked away, afraid the pressure behind my eyes might break. You don't have to say anything, she murmured. Just breathe. So I did. For the first time all day, I actually breathed. We talked after that. Not about her, not about me, just life. Small things. Movies. Weather. Work. Ordinary details that felt like oxygen. She didn't try to fix me. She just stayed. At some point, the tremor in my chest eased. My muscles unclenched. I sat back, eyes half closed. Better? She asked. A little. She nodded. Her hand was still on mine. Neither of us moved to remove it. Whenever you're ready, she said softly. You can tell me what happened. Not because I need to know, but because sometimes saying the words makes them real. And once something is real, you can face it. I swallowed hard. But I didn't speak. Not yet. She stayed with me until my breathing was steady again. Until the weight in my lungs had shifted from crushing to bearable. Then she rose, touched my shoulder gently, and said, Get some rest. Tomorrow will be easier. Not good, just easier. I watched her walk away. The faint sway of her hips. The quiet dignity in her posture. She wasn't trying to be alluring. She wasn't even aware of herself that way. And maybe that's why she was. When she reached the top of the stairs, she looked back. No one should sit alone with pain, she said. Not if they don't have to. The stairs creaked under her feet as she disappeared into the dark. I sat there long after she was gone, staring at the empty doorway, listening to the silence of a house that suddenly felt like the safest place I'd been in a long time. I woke up to soft light leaking through the slit of a high basement window, the kind that framed only the sky. Blue, cloudless, indifferent. It took me a moment to remember where I was. Will's place. No, his mother's. Linda. I sat up slowly on the couch, the blanket she'd left me folded carefully over my chest. A pillow I didn't remember taking was beneath my head. The air smelled faintly of citrus, like someone had opened a window recently or spritzed something comforting. I swung my legs over the edge of the couch and stood. The basement was quiet. No sounds from upstairs. Just the distant hum of the water heater and the creak of the house settling above me. It was a strange kind of peace. Private entrance. Small kitchen. A comfy armchair near a wall of bookshelves. The kind of space you disappear into without vanishing completely. Linda had been right. It was exactly what I needed. I ran a hand through my hair and looked around. There were subtle touches that gave the space its soul. A small framed print of a quiet lake. A knit throw over the back of the chair. A basket of rolled-up magazines by the bed. I wondered if Linda had decorated this herself. Not well. It didn't feel like him. This space wasn't masculine or trendy. It was lived in, warm. Safe. Safe. I exhaled through my nose and let myself sit down on the edge of the bed tucked behind the partition. Not mine, but more mine than anywhere else in the world right now. My phone buzzed from the floor where I'd thrown it the night before. A message from Amy. Are you still planning to come by and talk? No greeting. No emotion. Like we were negotiating a lunch meeting. I didn't answer. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then flipped it face down again. I wasn't ready. Maybe I would never be. I spent most of the day in the basement. I didn't move much. Just sat with the TV off, staring at nothing. My mind kept pulling me back to that moment in the taxi, to the red light, to Amy's smile. Not the kiss, but the smile before it. That was the thing that kept looping in my head. Her ease. Her freedom. There had been no hesitation in the way she leaned into him. No guilt in her hands. No worry in her eyes. She was at peace in his presence. I hadn't seen her that happy in months. Maybe longer. I kept thinking about her body language. How her hand settled on his chest like it had been there 100 times before. Not like an accident. Like a ritual. That image tore at me more than the sex I assumed had happened after. Sex was inevitable. The intimacy? That was betrayal in its rawest form. That's when I realized something. It wasn't that I'd been cheated on. It was that I had already been replaced. She had already moved on emotionally. I was just the body that hadn't left the house yet. Around noon, Linda knocked gently at the basement door and let herself in, holding a tray. I figured you might not eat unless it showed up on a plate, she said with a soft smile. A sandwich. Chips. Soup. Real napkin. You didn't have to do this, I said, even as I reached for the cup. Maybe not, she said. But sometimes doing something is better than watching someone fall apart quietly. She didn't stay, just smiled and stepped back, letting the silence return. But her presence lingered long after the door clicked shut. By mid-afternoon, I was showered and dressed in fresh clothes. Still hollow, still wrung out, but standing, breathing. I pulled my laptop from the bag and opened my inbox. Work. It was a distraction, if nothing else. Numbers. Deadlines. People who didn't care if my marriage had just died on the sidewalk of Maple and 6th. I answered a few emails. Flagged others. Read none of them twice. It was strange how normal everything still was. The world hadn't shifted. No headlines screamed about betrayal or heartbreak. Outside that basement window, life went on like nothing had happened. Eventually, the house above creaked again. Footsteps. Movement. I heard a faint hum of Linda's voice, singing, maybe, or talking to herself. And for some reason, that small, mundane sound steadied me. Not love, not infatuation, just gratitude. She was there, and that mattered. That night, I lay on the couch again, staring up at the ceiling beams. There were water stains on the drywall. Probably nothing serious, but it gave the place character. Nothing polished. Nothing fake. I liked that. I liked it more than I should have. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Amy, can we at least talk face to face? We owe each other that. I stared at the message. Then, without a word, I muted the thread and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I'd walk outside. Tomorrow, I'd take a breath that didn't feel like I was borrowing air. But tonight, I was just a man in a borrowed basement. Alone. But not as alone as I had been before Linda opened the door and said the one thing I hadn't known I needed to hear. You don't need to be alone tonight. I didn't expect to sleep, and I was right. The basement apartment was quiet, comfortable, the kind of quiet you think will soothe you. But silence, real silence, can become an echo chamber. And mine was filled with the same reel playing on loop. The cab, the red light, her kiss. I lay on the couch, eyes open, staring into the dark. Every time I closed them, I saw her smile, not at me, but at him. That soft curve of her mouth. Familiar, private, intimate, and suddenly, not mine anymore. I shifted under the blanket, flipping the pillow as if the cool side might reset my thoughts. It didn't. Neither did counting the cracks in the ceiling or listening to the low hum of the mini fridge in the corner. The house above me creaked with its own nighttime noises. Floorboards settling, pipes hissing, the faint mechanical breath of the HVAC kicking in. Normal, domestic sounds. But each one reminded me this wasn't home. Not anymore. Sometime after 1 a.m., I gave up, sat up, rubbed my hands over my face like I could scrub off the ache. Then, footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate. Above me, then to the stairs. A gentle knock at the door. I hesitated before answering. Not because I didn't want to, but because something about the timing, the hour, the sheer humanness of it cracked something in my chest I wasn't ready to deal with. When I opened the door, Linda stood there, barefoot in gray sweats and a light robe, holding a tray. I made tea, she said softly. If you're awake, come up. No explanations. No invitations that sounded like therapy sessions. Just tea. I followed her. Her kitchen was dimly lit again. Just that same small under-cabinet glow. It was enough. It always was. She moved like someone who had learned to make herself invisible in her own home. Quiet. Precise. Careful not to wake anyone. Though, at this hour, it was just the two of us. The mugs were mismatched. One had a faded floral print. The other said, "Don't talk to me until I've had my tea." She handed me that one without a word. I almost smiled. The chair creaked when I sat. She sat across from me, blowing gently on her tea. Her robe slipped just enough at the collar to show the top of her collarbone, and I looked away, unsure if I was allowed to notice. But I did. I hadn't been this close to a woman, really close, in days. Weeks, maybe. Amy and I hadn't touched much lately. Not outside routine. A kiss hello. A pat good night. Obligations, not affection. Linda sat with me like none of that mattered. No urgency. No curiosity pressing against her patience. We sipped tea in silence for a long stretch. Then, finally, I spoke. I saw her. She didn't ask who. I added, from the back of the taxi. We were stopped at a light. Linda's eyes didn't widen. Her body didn't stiffen. She just stayed with me. She was with someone else, I said, laughing. Hands all over each other. Then a kiss. I didn't need to describe it. Linda heard the way I said kiss, the weight behind it. The practiced familiarity. The theft of something sacred. I stared into my mug. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything. Just changed the address. Came here. Linda nodded slowly, then said, "That must have been like being punched in the chest." I almost choked on the air in my throat. Because yes, exactly that. "You think you know someone," I muttered. Then one red light later, "And it's like you never did." She didn't offer cliches. No, people change, or you'll be stronger for this. Just silence and understanding. I hadn't realized I was crying until her fingers touched my hand. Warm. Steady. She didn't squeeze or stroke. Just held it there. Human connection. Real. I didn't move away. She spoke again, softly. "It doesn't make you weak. Not feeling okay. Not knowing what to do." I met her eyes. They weren't pitying. They weren't searching for a story. They just saw me. Something inside me shifted. Not healed. Not even soothed. But seen. I didn't even feel angry at first. I said. Just numb. Like I'd stepped out of my own life. "That's shock," she said. "You're allowed it." Her voice was lower now. Almost a whisper. Sometimes anger is late. It waits until you're too tired to fight it off. Then it finds you. I looked at her then. Really looked. There were lines around her mouth and eyes. Laugh lines, yes, but also the kind that came from holding things in. From carrying burdens for others. She had loved someone once. Maybe more than once. I didn't ask. She stood slowly, reaching for the empty mugs. "Come upstairs if the silence gets too heavy," she said. "Or knock. I'm not made of glass." I managed a quiet, "Thank you." She leaned down just slightly and touched her lips to my temple. A kiss without expectation. Without agenda. Just a kiss that said, "You're not invisible. Not here." She left me with that and disappeared up the stairs. And for the first time in days, I slept. Not long. Not deep. But real sleep. With peace curled softly at the edges of it. The next morning came early. Too early. I didn't set an alarm, but sunlight knifed in through the basement window just enough to nudge me awake. I blinked at the ceiling, eyes gritty, throat dry, head still fogged from everything I'd carried into sleep. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered the basement. The tea. Her hand on mine. Her kiss on my temple like I was something breakable, but still worth handling carefully. "Linda." I sat up, still wearing the same shirt from the day before, wrinkled and stretched. The place smelled faintly of toast, or maybe that was memory playing tricks. I found my phone face down on the floor beside the couch. No new messages. Amy had gone silent. Part of me wanted that. Another part hated the silence more than any lie. By the time I made it upstairs, Linda was already at the kitchen table, sipping from the same sarcastic mug as the night before. "Don't talk to me until I've had my tea." She smiled when she saw me, but it wasn't performative. Just a soft curve of the lips, like she'd been expecting me. "Good morning," she said, pouring me a cup without asking. "Did you sleep?" I nodded. "Some." "That's a start." I took the cup and sat across from her. Her hair was tied back today, silver strands pulled into a low, casual ponytail. She wore a long sweater over leggings, barefoot again. She looked comfortable, not for anyone's sake, but her own. "You want to go for a walk?" she asked, surprising me. I blinked. "A walk." She shrugged. "It's a beautiful morning. Fresh air. Moving your body might help clear your head, or at least distract it." I didn't want to go. I also didn't want to stay here and drown in stillness. So I said sure. We left through the front door. The air had that early fall crispness, the kind that wakes you up better than coffee. The sun wasn't too strong yet, and the sidewalks were damp from overnight dew. Linda didn't rush. We walked side by side, not too close, not too far, just in step. For the first few blocks, we didn't speak. Houses passed us by, familiar in that suburban way. White fences, trimmed hedges, American flags limp in the breeze. Eventually she said, "You don't need to tell me anything today." I looked over. No, just don't feel like you have to perform sadness. Or strength. I nodded slowly. That meant more than I expected. After another minute, I asked, "How did you know I wouldn't be okay?" She smiled, not at me, but at the sidewalk. "Because nobody comes to a friend's house unannounced after a business trip if everything's fine." She glanced at me, expression soft. "And because I've been the person who wasn't okay. More times than I'd like to admit." We rounded a corner. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and distant cinnamon. Someone was baking. I said, "I feel stupid." "For what?" "For not seeing it." She stopped walking and turned to face me. "Your heart isn't broken," she said. It's bruised. That made me laugh, just a little. A bitter sound. She continued. Bruises heal, as long as you stop pressing on them. I met her eyes. They weren't wide with hope or glinting with sympathy. Just steady. Real. That line, I said. Did you read it on a pillow? No, she said with a half smile. I said it to myself the first night after my husband left. Then I drank a bottle of wine, broke a plate, and ugly cried into my dog's fur. We both laughed, and the sound felt foreign, but not wrong. We walked again, slower now. I found myself watching her more than the houses. The way her hand tucked loose hair behind her ear. The way she nodded at neighbors with a smile, even though they probably didn't know what I was doing walking beside her in yesterday's clothes. At one point, I apologized for my mood. She waved it off. You're allowed to grieve something that hasn't even ended yet. That's the hardest part, really. You're still in the middle of it. I looked at her. You ever miss him? My husband, she asked. I nodded. She took a breath, eyes ahead. Sometimes I miss the version of him I believed in. The version I thought I had. But the real one? The one who left without a word, without looking back? I don't miss him. I didn't press. We walked in silence for a few more minutes. Eventually, we reached a small park. The kind with 2 swings and a plastic slide shaped like a dragon. She sat on a bench, and I joined her. Leaves crunched under our shoes. I'm afraid, I said finally, that I'll forgive her just because it's easier than starting over. Linda turned toward me. Then don't make any decisions yet, she said. Not while the bruise is still fresh. I nodded, then stared down at my hands in my lap. Can I ask you something? I said. Of course. When you look at me, do I look pathetic? Her expression changed, softened into something almost maternal, but not pitying. You look like someone who loved deeply, she said, and who's trying not to fall apart from realizing that love might not be returned the same way. She added, that's not pathetic. That's human. I couldn't respond. I just sat there, letting her words settle in like warmth from the sun. On the walk back, something loosened in me. Not healed, not yet, but lighter. And as we approached the front steps, Linda turned to me and said something I'd carry with me for the rest of the day. Whatever happens next happens, but for now you're here, and that's enough. I heard the front door open around 7 p.m. Keys jingling, sneakers against the hardwood, then a voice I hadn't heard in months. Mom? I'm home. Something smells amazing. Did you cook or commit a felony? I froze halfway through chopping vegetables in the kitchen. Linda had me helping her prep a simple pasta dinner, something to get my mind out of itself. Her way of grounding me was subtle. Give me a task, make me useful, feed me. Now that voice, Will, was coming closer, footsteps thudding down the hallway, backpack dropped by the door, jacket slung over the banister. My heart kicked a beat harder. Linda looked at me and murmured, he's early. I straightened my back and wiped my hands on a towel. Do I say something or... He'll find you, she said softly, a little amused. No hiding in my kitchen. And right on cue, Will rounded the corner and came face to face with me. He stopped mid-step, eyebrows lifted in surprise. Holy shit, he said. What are you doing here? There it was. No welcome. No hostility either. Just genuine confusion. We hadn't seen each other since my birthday last spring. I half laughed. Nice to see you too. He stepped forward, giving me a quick but solid hug. It's been forever, man. You okay? The question hit different. I opened my mouth to lie, but Linda saved me. He's staying for a bit, she said, sliding a tray of garlic bread into the oven. Personal stuff. No questions unless he brings it up. We'll look between us. Okay, got it. He was older now, a little thicker around the waist, but still had that easygoing air about him. We'd roomed together back in college. Cheap apartment, late-night takeout, loud music, louder women. Those were days we didn't try to be adults. Just survivors of the in-between. How long you in town? He asked. A while, I said. Not sure yet. He nodded slowly, then glanced at his mom. You're feeding him, I see. I feed strays, she replied dryly. That made us both laugh. Dinner was easy, surprisingly so. Linda had a way of creating space without forcing it. She led the conversation into safe waters, funny neighborhood stories, Will's chaotic job, a TV series she was annoyed with but wouldn't stop watching. I didn't say much, just enough not to seem detached. But I watched them. Linda, with her deliberate grace. Will, trying to hide how tired he really was beneath his usual sarcasm. They moved around each other with a practiced rhythm, the kind that can only come from shared history and silent agreements. Later, Will opened a couple of beers and tossed one my way. We sat on the back porch, the air cooling into something crisp and clean. The kind of evening that reminded you summer was gone and fall was settling in. He sipped his beer and leaned back. So he said, "How bad is it?" I stared at the stars. "It's bad." He didn't push. I said, "Saw her kissing someone else. From a taxi." His jaw tightened. Not from shock, but from empathy. Damn. Yeah. No fight. No. Just left. "Did you talk to her?" "No. Just a few texts." He looked over at me. "You still love her?" I considered that question longer than I expected. "I don't know what I feel," I said, "but I'm not angry. Yet. And I think that might be worse." He nodded slowly, then drained the rest of his beer. After a long pause, he said, "Mom told me you were here. Didn't mention much else." "Did she say I was falling apart?" "No, but I could guess." Another silence. Then, quieter, he said, "She likes having you here." I turned toward him. "You okay with that?" He shrugged. "It's not about me." But something tightened in his voice. He didn't say it outright. Not yet, but I heard it. A flicker of unease. Maybe not about me staying. Maybe not even about my situation. But about something else. Something I hadn't fully named yet. I watched him take a slow breath and stare out at the yard. He tapped the bottle against his thigh, a small, restless rhythm. He added, "She's been lonely a long time. Just don't forget that." I looked away. That landed harder than he probably meant it to, because I had noticed the way she lingered in the doorway, the warmth of her touch, the softness in her voice. And maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe she wasn't either. But there it was. Will stood and stretched. "I'm beat. You good down there?" "Yeah," I said. "Thanks again." He nodded and disappeared into the house, leaving the screen door to creak and click shut behind him. I sat alone in the dark a little longer, nursing the last of my beer. Inside the house, I could hear Linda washing dishes, and I realized then that I didn't want to go back down to the basement. Not yet. It started with a knock on the basement door. Light, polite. Not a summons, an invitation. I opened it to find Linda in a navy dress that fell just below her knees. Nothing dramatic. No plunging neckline. No lipstick war paint. But something about it made me pause. Maybe the way the fabric clung a little at the waist, or the way her silver-streaked hair was gathered behind her neck in a loose knot. "Dinner's ready," she said simply. "Join me." I almost asked if Will was home, then stopped myself. I followed her upstairs. The table was already set. 2 plates, candles lit, but not romantic, just warm. She moved like someone used to feeding herself alone, but she'd made the effort tonight. She gestured for me to sit. "Hope you're okay with salmon." I was. I would have eaten cardboard if she'd served it. She poured us each a glass of wine. Not a full glass. She measured it casually, like it mattered not to overdo anything. I appreciated that more than I said. Over dinner, the conversation drifted easily. She told a story about a nosy neighbor and her cat's latest misadventures. I countered with something about a coworker who once accidentally sent a rant about our boss to the boss. She laughed. Really laughed. Not the careful, curated laugh you give someone out of politeness, but something genuine. It lit her eyes. "I missed this," she said suddenly, then looked away quickly. "Dinner with company, I mean." I took a sip of wine and said, "It's nice being here." She smiled again, and it softened something in her face that I hadn't realized was tense. After we cleared the plates, I offered to help with dishes. She didn't argue. We moved around each other in the small kitchen, and the space between us felt different. Not tense, but charged. When we reached for the same plate, our hands touched. It wasn't dramatic. No music swelled, but it stopped us. I looked at her, and she looked at me, and for a second, the air shifted, just slightly, but enough. We didn't speak. We just held the moment between us like something fragile and unnamed. I pulled my hand back, murmuring sorry. She didn't move away. "Don't be," she said. Something unspoken passed between us then. Not desire, not yet, but recognition of what we were, of what we weren't pretending anymore. Later, we sat in the living room with tea instead of dessert. Linda curled her feet up under her on the couch. I sat across from her in the armchair. The lights were dim. The window was cracked open. The sounds of evening filtered in, crickets, the occasional car. I was married for 16 years, she said quietly. I turned toward her. He was decent. Until he wasn't. That's usually how it goes, right? Good until it turns. What happened? I asked gently. He stopped seeing me, she said. Not looking. Not listening. Just existing beside me. I nodded. I didn't need to ask more. I understood. And for the first time, I told her what I hadn't said to anyone. I saw her smile at him, I said. That hurt more than the kiss. She looked at me. Because you used to be the one she smiled at like that. I swallowed. Exactly. Linda stood and picked up the teacups. I reached to help, but she waved me off. When she returned from the kitchen, she didn't sit back on the couch. She leaned against the doorway and said, he won't ask. But Will's noticed. I knew who she meant. I exhaled. I figured. He's protective, she added. But he also knows I'm not breakable. No, I said. You're not. She smiled at that, something subtle, edged with experience. I should go back downstairs, I said, standing. She didn't stop me. But she didn't move either. Just watch me walk toward the stairs. And as I reached the top step, she said, you're not a burden, you know. I looked back at her. And you don't owe anyone an apology for being hurt. I nodded. The lump in my throat didn't allow more. As I descended the stairs, I heard movement behind me. A door closing, soft, final. And yet, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something beginning. Will didn't say anything that night. But I saw it in the way he glanced at me when I passed him in the hallway. Not anger, but tension. He felt the shift. And so did I. Because dinner hadn't been just a meal. It had been acknowledgement. That whatever had cracked in both of us, me and Linda, was starting to let something else through. And neither of us wanted to pretend anymore. There was no storm. No dramatic twist. No shouting. No slamming doors. Just quiet. I started to expect the soft knock on the basement door in the evenings. Never at the same time, but always gentle, 3 light taps, like she didn't want to wake a sleeping dog. And always the same phrase when I opened it. I'm having tea. Join me if you like. Sometimes I said yes. Sometimes I didn't. But every time, I wanted to. The nights we shared tea, we sat at the same kitchen table where I had first spoken about Amy. Same mismatched mugs. Same soft light. There was a rhythm to it now. Familiarity in the smallest things. She never asked what my days were like unless I offered. And I didn't ask about hers. Some nights we talked for hours, about books, music, childhood stories, weird dreams. Other nights we said almost nothing. It didn't matter. Silence had stopped being uncomfortable. She told me one night, after pouring her second cup, I think people forget how intimate silence is. I nodded. Most people talk just to hide from it. She looked at me then, really looked, and said, that's why I like the way you sit in it. You don't fill it with noise. I didn't tell her then, but that was the first compliment that had meant anything to me in years. It was on a Wednesday night, after one of our longer tea sessions, when I finally said it. What I'd seen. We were sitting shoulder to shoulder on the couch. She'd migrated there from the table and patted the cushion beside her like it was the most casual thing in the world. Her robe brushed against my arm. The warmth of her body seeped into the fabric, and I didn't move away. I said it quietly, eyes on the carpet. I saw them kiss. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp or offer shock. Just turned her head slightly, her voice low. You hadn't told me that part. No, I said. I couldn't. I didn't want to see it again by saying it out loud. She nodded once. Then after a pause. That must have been like being punched in the chest. It was the second time she'd said that. And it landed just as hard. I didn't respond right away. Just let the words hang in the air between us. Eventually, I said, she didn't even look sorry. That's what broke me. It was like she'd already made peace with it. Linda didn't touch me. Not yet. She just whispered, I'm sorry. And somehow, from her, it didn't feel like a platitude. It felt like grief shared. I leaned back into the couch and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for days. She used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. I said, not because she needed to, just because she wanted the contact. Now she can't even look me in the eye when she texts. What does she say? Linda asked gently. I shook my head. Nothing real. Just logistics. Like I'm the house sitter. We sat in silence. Then she shifted, so our shoulders touched. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't rushed. It was deliberate and tender and without apology. And I didn't move away. At some point, the tea went cold. I don't remember what we talked about after. Maybe we didn't. Maybe we just existed in that stillness. Two people orbiting grief, leaning into warmth, trying not to name the thing that was starting to form between us. Because naming it might scare it off, or bring it too close, too fast. The next night, she knocked again. And again, I joined her. We didn't mention what had happened. The closeness, the quiet shoulder-to-shoulder intimacy. We didn't need to. We'd crossed something invisible. Not a line, a threshold, and we both knew it. On Saturday morning, I made tea for her. That was the first time I initiated anything. Just walked up the stairs, knocked, and when she opened the door in her robe and sleepy smile, I held out the mug and said, "Your turn to drink, my turn to brew." She looked at me like I'd just told her a secret I didn't know I was keeping. "Stay," she said. "It's nicer with company." We sat on her porch. The sun had just crept over the rooftops, throwing gold into the trees. She wrapped her hands around the mug like it was a lifeline. Her voice was soft when she said, "I didn't realize how much I missed mornings with someone else around." I looked at her. Not her body, not her robe, not her curves. Her. And it was suddenly so clear that this wasn't about sex. Not yet. It was about being witnessed. And wanted. Without the wreckage of performance. I said, "I didn't realize how much I missed being seen." She reached out, touched my knee. A simple gesture. But it burned in the most gentle, human way. Later that day, I got another text from Amy. "We should talk. I still think we can figure this out." I didn't reply. Instead, I set the phone down and went upstairs. Linda was folding laundry in the living room, humming something low. She glanced up. "I didn't mean to bother you," I said. "Just wanted to be where you are." Her smile was quiet. "You're never a bother." And for the first time in weeks, I believed it. The question came over breakfast. Will and I were both in the kitchen, the house quiet except for the occasional clink of silverware. Linda had gone out early to pick up a few things from the farmer's market. I offered to go with her, but she just smiled and said, "Give us both a little space. Just for the morning." I hadn't seen Will since dinner 2 nights ago, but his eyes said everything he hadn't yet. He stirred his coffee, didn't look up. Then, finally, "Are you interested in my mom?" The air between us froze, tense but still. I set down my fork, slowly. "What makes you ask that?" Will finally looked up, expression unreadable. "Because I've seen the way you look at her, and the way she looks at you." I didn't respond right away. I didn't have an answer that wasn't a lie, and I respected him too much to lie. So I said nothing. And that said enough. Will leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. Not angry, just protective. "She's been alone a long time," he said. "She deserves something real, not something temporary." I swallowed, guilt like gravel in my throat. "I didn't plan this," I said quietly. He nodded. "Life doesn't wait for plans." Then he stood, dumped the rest of his coffee in the sink, and said without looking back, "Just don't hurt her." That hurt more than I expected it to. Linda came home later that morning with bags of vegetables and fresh bread. I helped her unpack in silence. She noticed my mood, but didn't ask. I was grateful for that. We moved around each other like something had shifted, and it had. Will's question lingered in the air between us, unspoken but present. I watched her laugh at something on the radio. A low, warm laugh that pulled her whole face into the moment. I realized I'd started timing my days around hearing that laugh. I wasn't just staying here anymore. I was hoping here. It happened that night. There was no build-up, no dramatic confession, no romantic music in the background. Just a hallway. Just her standing there in her robe, hair down, eyes steady. And me, at the bottom of the stairs, looking up. She didn't speak. Neither did I. We just moved. I climbed the stairs slowly, watching her eyes. She didn't look away. When we stood inches apart, she reached up and brushed her fingers against my cheek. I leaned in, but didn't rush. When our lips met, it wasn't explosive. It was slow, cautious, certain. Her hands slid to my shoulders. Mine settled at her waist. The kiss deepened, but not with hunger, with recognition. A kiss that said, "I see you. I want you. I'm not afraid of this." We didn't speak. Words would have ruined it. We just held each other in the dim hallway, hearts thudding in quiet rhythm, breaths mingling. Then she stepped back, just an inch, and said, "Do you want to stay?" I nodded. She turned, walked slowly down the hall, and I followed. We didn't fall into bed like lovers in a movie. We sat on the edge of it, facing each other. Her fingers traced my jawline, my temple, my chest. Not with desire, with intention. Like she was learning the shape of a memory she wanted to keep. We undressed slowly, carefully. Not to tease, not to seduce, but to reveal. Her body was strong and soft in the ways time makes real women. Her stretch marks didn't hide. Her hips were fuller than they used to be, and beautiful because of it. She didn't apologize for any of it. And I didn't look away. There was no guilt in me. No adrenaline spike. Just warmth. Closeness. Peace. She climbed into bed first. I followed. We held each other under the covers, skin to skin, and for a long time, that was enough. When we made love, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't revenge. It was connection. Two bodies aching not for escape, but for presence. She whispered my name once. Just once. And it landed deeper than anything I'd heard in years. Afterward, she curled into me like she'd done it 1,000 times. And I wrapped my arm around her, feeling something settle in my chest that had been scattered since the night in the taxi. Home. Not a place. Not a house. A person. We didn't talk much the next morning. But we didn't avoid each other either. She made coffee. I made toast. We moved around the kitchen in quiet choreography, occasionally bumping hips or brushing shoulders, and neither of us flinched. Will came in around noon, and we both froze for a moment, like teenagers caught sneaking in past curfew. He paused when he saw us standing side by side, coffee cups in hand. He didn't say anything, just looked at us, then muttered, "I'm going out," and left. The door clicked shut behind him. Linda sighed. "He's adjusting. He's right to be cautious," I said. She turned to me. "So are you. But I'm not afraid," I added. Her smile was small, but real. Will didn't say much the next few days. He was polite, quiet, distant. The tension in the house wasn't sharp, not like knives. It was dull, like a bruise beneath the skin. You could ignore it for a while, pretend it wasn't there, but it always reminded you if you pressed too hard. Linda and I gave him space. We didn't flaunt anything. We didn't sneak around either. We simply existed, close and careful, letting the air settle around us. Some mornings I stayed in the basement a little longer, made noise to let him know I was still just a guest. Some nights, I walked past her bedroom door, heart aching, wanting to knock, but choosing not to. And then, one evening, it happened. He walked in on us. Not in bed, but close. It was late, maybe past 10. We were on the couch in the living room. The lights were low, a movie playing softly in the background, something we weren't watching. Her legs were curled over mine, her head resting on my chest, one of her hands absently tracing small circles against my arm. We weren't kissing. We weren't touching in any explicit way. But we were clearly together, and he knew it. The front door opened without warning. A gust of cold air blew in before he stepped inside. We both sat up, startled but not ashamed. Will froze in the doorway. His eyes went to her hand on my leg, to my arm behind her back, then to me. "You serious?" he asked. Linda stood slowly. "Will." "No," he cut in. "You're really doing this?" She didn't flinch. "He needed someone," she said calmly. "So did I." He laughed once. Bitter. "So what? This is your big second act? Falling into bed with my college roommate while his marriage collapses?" "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't reduce me to that." His jaw tightened. "I'm not reducing anything," he said. "I'm just trying to understand what the hell I'm looking at." "You're looking at two adults," she said, "who found comfort in each other when the world didn't offer much else." Will turned to me. "And you? You didn't think to say anything? Not even a warning?" I stood then, slow and steady. "I didn't plan this," I said. "I didn't expect it. But it's not nothing." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned back to his mother. "You could have told me." "I was going to," she said. "When it was time." "And when's that exactly?" he snapped. "After I walk in on you again? Next time, maybe you'll be naked?" "Will," she said, quieter now. "You're angry. I understand. But this isn't about you." He looked like she'd slapped him. "Really? It's not about me?" He said. "You're my mother. He's my friend. You think this won't mess things up?" "No," she said. "I think it'll change things. But not ruin them. Unless you let it." The silence that followed was thick, charged. Finally, Will exhaled. Not rage, exhaustion. I thought I knew what this house was," he said. "I thought I could come home and it would still be the same." Linda stepped forward then. Carefully. Slowly. "It hasn't been the same in a long time," she said. "You just didn't notice." He didn't respond. He didn't storm out. He just stood there, shoulders heavy, eyes flicking between the two of us. Then he said, "I need some air." And he left. Later that night, I found her in the kitchen. She was staring out the window, arms crossed over her chest, the kettle long forgotten on the stove behind her. I walked up beside her and didn't speak. After a moment, she said, "I didn't want to hurt him." "You didn't." She glanced at me. "He's hurting." I nodded. "But not because of us. Because things are changing." She looked back out the window. "I hate that part of life." "What part?" "The way it keeps moving forward, even when you're not ready." I stepped closer, not touching her yet. "Are you ready now?" She turned, slowly, and met my eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "But I still feel guilty." "That means you care," I said. "Not that you're wrong." She reached out then, took my hand in hers, and leaned her forehead against my shoulder. We stayed like that for a long time. No words. No need for them. Just breathing. Together. We'll return the next day. He didn't slam doors. Didn't ignore us. He just sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and said, "I'm not thrilled about it." "I understand," I said. "But," he added, "I'm not blind. I saw the way she looked at you even before this started." Linda, across the room, stilled. He looked at her. "And you looked happy. Happier than I've seen you in years." Her voice was small. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "I know," he said. Then, after a pause, "I think maybe that's why it matters." He stood, brushed crumbs off his jeans, and added, "Just don't screw it up." And then he left the room. Linda sat down slowly. Her eyes glistened. "He's right," she whispered. "This matters." I took her hand and held it like it was the first and last honest thing in the world. It had been 9 days since I saw my wife kiss another man through the taxi window. 10 days since I'd last touched her, spoke to her face to face, called her Amy with anything resembling warmth. And yet, when the text came through, plain, unsentimental, familiar, it still made my stomach twist. "Come home. We need to talk. I miss you." No punctuation. No emoji. Just her voice, captured in text. Cool, detached, but practiced. The kind of message you could imagine being copy-pasted to someone else if she ever needed it again. I stared at it for a long time. Linda didn't ask about it. She never looked at my phone, never pried, never inserted herself into decisions that weren't hers to make. But that night, as we sat in the living room, our fingers loosely intertwined, I told her anyway. She wants to meet. For coffee. Linda didn't react at first, just nodded, slowly. "She wants me to come home," I added. Now she turned to me. "Are you going to?" "I don't know," I said. "I think I need to hear what she says. Not because I'm hoping, but because I need to close the door." Linda nodded again. "Then go. But don't let her rewrite the story." "I won't," I said. Then after a pause, "I already know how it ends." We met at a quiet cafe we used to visit once a month. Back when date nights were scheduled like dentist appointments. Back when I still believed ritual could save routine. She was already sitting when I arrived. A latte in front of her. Designer coat. Phone face down on the table like a peace offering. She smiled when she saw me. I didn't smile back. "You look tired," she said. "I am." She took a sip and studied me over the rim of her cup. "I was hoping we could talk." I nodded once. "I'm here." She cleared her throat. "I know things looked bad. That night. But." I stopped her there. Just 2 words. "I saw you." She froze. And for the first time since this began, she looked small. Not angry. Not even sorry. Just caught. Her mouth opened, then shut again. "Amy," I said quietly, "don't lie. Don't insult both of us." Tears welled up quickly. Theatrically. Maybe real, maybe not. I didn't have the energy to dissect them. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. I almost laughed. The cliché of it all. The script. How easily she slid into it. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "A few months. Not serious. Not anymore." I nodded. "You kissed him like you'd done it 100 times." She flinched. Then the excuses came. The emotional distance. The long nights. The way I was always somewhere else. I let her talk. Let her try to rebuild a version of our marriage that placed equal blame in every crack. But I didn't feel anger anymore. Just clarity. When she finished, I said, "You could have told me you were lonely. You could have asked me to fight for us." "I didn't know how," she said. I shook my head. "No, you just didn't want to." She reached for my hand across the table. I didn't move. "I miss you," she said. "We can come back from this. We've been through worse." "No," I said. "We haven't." And then I stood. And she knew. I didn't need to say more. Her face crumbled, but I didn't look back. I went straight back to the house. The porch light was on, like it always was. My bag was still in the basement, half unpacked, as if part of me had known this was where I'd return. I opened the door. Linda was standing at the top of the basement stairs, barefoot, cardigan wrapped around her. She hadn't heard me yet, but when she saw me, she didn't smile. Not yet. She just looked and waited. I don't want to live down there anymore, I said. Her face softened. Then don't, she said simply. I walked up the stairs toward her. She stepped aside, letting me pass, then followed me down the hall to her room. No hesitation, no question, no fear. I unpacked my bag that night, folded each shirt carefully, hung my jackets next to hers, brushed my teeth in the upstairs bathroom like I belonged there, because I did. We didn't celebrate. There was no triumphant sex, no passionate declarations. Just peace. Just two adults choosing each other without shame, without panic, without confusion. Later, in bed, I asked, "Are we crazy?" Linda turned toward me, her hand finding mine beneath the sheets. "No," she said. "We're honest." And in the quiet that followed, with her breath against my shoulder and her fingers tucked between mine, I believed her. Because love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the form of a quiet kitchen, a shared mug of tea, and the courage to walk away from what was never meant to last.